People are very passionate when they talk about filtration because who doesn't want the best equipment, cleanest tank, healthiest fish, right? So let's do a head-to-head comparison of hang-on-back versus sponge filters. Hi, my name is Irene with girltalksfish, here with practical tips on nanofish and planted aquariums. And as you can see, most of my aquariums are on the smaller side, 20 gallons or less. So my two favorite filters to use for them are the hang-on-back filter and the sponge filter, both because they're great at what they do and they're pretty easy to clean. But which one is best? Let's go through all the categories. First up is cost. So this is an AquaClear 50. It comes with filter media already in it, the mechanical filtration, biological filtration, and usually it has a bag of chemical filtration. However, I removed that, got some extra mechanical filtration, as well as this pre-filter sponge to prevent fry and leaves and other gunk from getting sucked up. So all in all, that cost me about $50. As for the cost to run it, it takes about 6 watts of power. Now, a sponge filter system actually has more components. So you have the sponge filter itself. I like to add an air stone inside of it. You have the airline tubing that connects everything, a check valve to prevent flooding, as well as the air pump that drives air into the sponge filter. However, all of these pieces cost about $33, at least for me. I currently use 2 different air pumps. The USB nano air pump is weaker in power. It actually only takes about 1/3 of a watt versus the more powerful AquaTop AP50 takes about 2 watts of power. So still less than the AquaClear 50. So in this category for cost, I have to give it to the sponge filter. Our next category is appearance and noise level. I would say most people believe that the hang-on-back filter is prettier just because most of this box over here and the motor all hang behind the aquarium outside of it, so you can't see it. The only thing inside of the aquarium is this tube. But for me, I have a pre-filter sponge on it, so it's still something that I have to block, while it's hanging in the aquarium. I have to use something in front of it so it doesn't look so bad. For noise, it basically has the water coming out of this area over here. It sounds like a waterfall. So if you don't like that waterfall noise to be as loud, go ahead and raise up the level of the water in your aquarium. The water doesn't have as far to fall, and therefore it's quieter. Now, a lot of people don't like sponge filters, especially if you're trying to do a pretty aquascape, just because, it's kind of big and you try to hide it. The Aquarium Co-op sponge filter, I feel like isn't that bad though. It's black, so it blends in with my black substrate, my black background, and then it's green, which kind of blends in with the plants, and it also hides any algae that tends to grow here. I don't know if you can spot them. I've got a sponge filter over here behind this Java fern, which you can definitely see the uplift tube coming out of, but it's not too bad. As well as I have a small sponge filter over here hidden behind the Pogostemon stellatus, so it's not that bad. In terms of sound, a lot of people don't mind the bubbling sound of a sponge filter. I do, so that's why I put the air stone inside of it, because it breaks the bubbles down into even smaller, tinier bubbles, and then when those tiny bubbles pop at the surface, you can't hear that bubbling sound at all. The other source of sound would be from the air pump. If you're looking for the quietest air pump on the market that I found at least, go for the USB nano air pump. It's weaker in power in terms of the amount of air it can push, but it's very, very quiet. However, if you have a deeper tank or you need more bubbles, more air pressure, the AquaTop AP50, you can do lots of things like put it on a towel so it doesn't vibrate as much against surfaces, or even hang it inside of a basket or container so that it's suspended in air and it's not touching anything. So for appearance and noise level, for me personally, I rate them about the same just because, again, I do have that big pre-filter sponge on the hang-on-back. Now let's talk about ease of installation. I mean, you can't get much easier than this AquaClear. They basically give you all the filter media, you put it inside the basket, and then you plug it in. That's about it. Versus a sponge filter, while it's pretty easy to use, but for beginners, there's just a lot of pieces to put together, which I have a whole video about over here on how to install a sponge filter. So once you've done it once, it's fairly easy, but I feel like the learning curve for beginners is sometimes a little bit higher than the AquaClear. So I'm gonna give ease of installation to the hang-on-back filter. Now, the category that everybody wants to know about is the effectiveness. How well does it filter the water? So let's start with the sponge filter. The bubbles that exit the top of the sponge filter are really good at creating surface agitation, which is really important because as the water surface is agitated, it creates gas exchange where more oxygen can re-enter the water and replenish it for the fish to use, as well as the carbon dioxide they were using can exit the water. So that's important. Sponge filters are also known for having gentle flow, which is important to me because I have mostly nano tanks with nano fish. They can't handle a lot of fast current, as well as I like to breed fish and this won't suck up any baby fry. In terms of the types of filtration it can do, the sponge right here is really good at growing biological filtration or beneficial bacteria, so they live in the sponge area. And then the mechanical filtration is where it strains out the debris and particles and gunk in the water. Now, this particular sponge is a coarse sponge, which is good because it means it won't clog up as quickly. I don't have to constantly be cleaning and maintaining this. However, because it's coarser and the holes in it are bigger, it will strain out the bigger particles, but some of the smaller particles may still be left floating around in the water. Now, a hang-on back filter also has good surface agitation as the water falls down back into your aquarium. You can control the flow here using this little knob, make it faster or slower, as well as I have this pre-filter sponge here to prevent any fry or baby fish from being sucked up. However, where I think the scales are tipped is the hang-on back filter has so much customization here. You remember that I said it came with 3 types of filtration. You can do mechanical, biological, and chemical filtration, which you can't really do as easily with the sponge filter. And you can take out any pieces you want and add more. I, in fact, like to oftentimes put a piece of fine filter floss at the very top so that it'll really polish the water and get those tiny, tiny particles that I mentioned before. So if you're looking for that crystal clear water, the hang-on back filter may be the way to go. So for effectiveness of the filter, I'm going to give the edge to the hang-on back filter just because it is so customizable. Next category is ease of maintenance. I don't know about you, but I do not have a lot of time on my hands. For the sponge filter, pretty easy. You just pop off the top, remove the sponge part here, squeeze it in some old tank water so you get all the gunk out, and then just reinstall it. That's about it. A hang-on back filter is pretty nice because you don't even have to stick your hands in the water. You just take the lid off, remove the filter media, swish it around or squeeze it in some old tank water, put it back, refill it, and then start your pump. So both of them, I would say ease of maintenance, about the same. The next section is called ease of use. I'm not sure if this is the right word for it, but basically problems that I didn't foresee coming along the way. So if you haven't seen my video over here, basically at one point the AquaClear ended up flooding my hardwood floors. If you do not, nobody told me this, if you do not maintenance your filter regularly, meaning cleaning out the gunk that collects here, these sponges will start to grow and grow and grow because there's more waste in there, right? That will eventually lift this lid slightly so that water starts trickling out of the side of the basket and onto your floors slowly over time, so you can't really tell until you see the wood panels are buckling. Not a great day to discover that, and definitely a time where I thought my husband was going to make me quit the hobby. The second issue happened when I was on vacation. There was a power outage, and AquaClears specifically, they have a unique quirk where they will not basically restart when the power goes on. Oh, it'll restart all right, but when the power goes off, basically all of the water just drains out of the basket in this entire area. Well, when the power comes on again, this motor will start running dry, which you do not want to happen. So when I came home, I heard this horrible grinding sound. This motor was trying to go the whole time and it basically ended up burning out. So in order to restart your filter after you turn it off, you have to pour water into this basket over here and then plug in your filter. Not a great time because this motor costs about half the amount of what the entire filter cost. As for a sponge filter, well, as long as you have a check valve, it's not going to flood your house. Basically, the filter is sitting inside of the tank. That's also good because in a power outage, the beneficial bacteria is going to stay wet inside of your tank versus on the hang-on back, it's gonna dry out and potentially die, and you're gonna have to recycle that aquarium. But anyways, back to the sponge filter. When the power comes back on, it's gonna automatically start bubbling again. There's no need to have special instructions for how to restart it. And then if you're using that USB nano air pump, it's really nice because you can go on Amazon and buy basically this backup battery. You plug it into the USB part into here, it goes into the wall. If there's no power, all of a sudden this battery takes over and can continue running that air pump. And remember, the USB nano air pump is only taking like 1/3 of a watt, so it lasts quite a while. Finally, let's talk about robustness. How long is this filter gonna last? Do you need to replace it every few years? At least in my experience. Now, I haven't kept filters for decades and decades and decades, but sponge filters seem to last forever as long as you don't have fish or large fish or turtles taking chunks out of it. Maybe like the air pump might go after a while because it does have a diaphragm that vibrates, but in general, the sponge filter itself is gonna last forever. Versus the hang-on back filter has a motor with actual moving mechanical parts, and those tend to have wear and tear at a faster rate. So in my case, I don't know how, because I have a pre-filter sponge on this, but at some point maybe it got knocked off and sand got sucked in and ended up ruining my second motor. So I had to spend money for 2 different motors, and that ended up being basically the cost of a whole new AquaClear. So in my book, robustness, the sponge filter's gotta win. If you've been keeping track, you know that the sponge filter is slightly higher on my personal scorecard because of the flooding issues and then the fact I had to replace not just 1, but 2 motors on my AquaClear. So that's why currently all of my tanks run sponge filters. That being said, sometimes I do miss having that crystal clear water that the hang-on back filter can give you, and I think about putting it back on this tank. And then I remember that expression that Mr. Gamer made when he found out about me ruining our hardwood floors, and I just don't think it's worth ruining our marriage over. Let me know down in the comments which filter you prefer and why. And also, huge thanks to Lydia for this beautiful painting. I absolutely love it. I'm gonna hang it up in my office somewhere. Thank you so much. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.